The snow whispered underfoot, muffling the bootfalls of soldiers who thought themselves gods. Towering in height, clad in iridescent exo-armor, the soldiers of the Veruan Legion descended from their orbiting warships with measured grace. Their sleek plasma carbines hummed softly, each bearing etchings of 1,000 conquered worlds. High Marshal Trexer stood at the crest of a ridgeline, his cape billowing like a shadow against the dim light of New Ganymede sun. He surveyed the valley below, a graveyard of pine trees and mist-shrouded gullies, untouched by the fires of war. That would change soon. These humans, he said, voice metallic through his translation visor, still rely on combustion engines and steel casings. Primitive, inelegant. A second figure stepped beside him, thinner, swathed in command fibers. Our scouts encountered metal beasts, tracked vehicles. Sluggish, loud. They have no shielding. Trexer chuckled. They're not soldiers. They're relics playing war. But 2 miles south, deep within the frozen woods, something stirred beneath camouflage, netting layered with frost and mud. A low rumble rolled out through the trees, slow and deliberate, vibrating the earth like a warning. The shape of the M1 Abrams tank emerged from the undergrowth like a prehistoric predator. Its surface bore pockmarks from past battles, its paint chipped and scorched, but its cannon, the long, brutal 120mm smoothbore, remained steady, unwavering. Inside, Captain Elias Grant leaned forward in his command seat. He was a man carved from hard years, face cross-hatched with lines that spoke of grit, not age. A ragged scar dragged from his temple to jaw, a souvenir from the last war Earth never wanted but never ran from. Engine's good. Ammo holds, muttered Barnes from the loader's seat. She's ready, boss. Elias nodded once. Then we wait. They'll come. No speeches. No bravado. Just steel and resolve. Outside, 10 Abrams tanks sat idle in a loose arc along the natural bowl of the valley, their camouflage blending seamlessly with the terrain. Infantry crouched between snowbanks and dugouts, bundled in thermal gear and human stubbornness. Each man and woman had stared down invaders before. This would be no different. The only thing new was the opponent's arrogance. From the other end of the valley, the sky cracked as the Empire's assault craft disgorged a wave of armored hover units and gleaming quadrupeds bristling with plasma turrets. The lead walkers touched the snowy earth with an unnatural hum, disturbing pine needles and vaporizing a few unlucky birds. Visual on enemy formation, said Reyes from the gunner's seat. No tank treads, all floaters and gliders. They're loud. Good, Elias murmured. Let them make noise. Over the comms, the battalion's signal crackled. Lieutenant Singh's voice came through, taut with anticipation. Ready to engage on your mark, Captain. Negative, Elias replied. Let them move in. Let them get confident. He could hear the others breathing, waiting. The tank's interior was a womb of old tech, buttons worn to smoothness, a rattle in the left vent they never bothered fixing. Outside, winter kept its icy breath steady, waiting for blood to stain its purity. Trexer's advance units began their push into the valley. Infantry spread like liquid metal, advancing with choreographed ease. Above them, drones zipped overhead, mapping heat signatures and scanning electromagnetic pulses. The Empire's field commanders chuckled at the thermal images, cold, sluggish engine blocks buried in snow. They call these tanks? One of them snorted. Dead weights. Trexer did not speak. He didn't need to. His face bore the arrogance of someone who had never known true resistance. From inside Mahler, Elias watched the blinking light on the targeting console. 60 meters. 40. 20. Now. The first shell fired with a sound that seemed to rupture time. A thunderclap so sudden, so visceral, it sent flocks of birds scattering into the frozen sky. The sabot round screamed through air and hit the lead walker center mass. There was no explosion at first, just silence, then a groaning tear as energy fields crumpled, metal folded, and the machine collapsed inward in a blaze of orange and fire. The second Abrams fired, then the third. Within 6 seconds, 3 Empire units were engulfed in fireballs. Snow melted in patches from the concussive force. Human troops rose from the trenches and began their charge, rifles blazing. The Empire didn't react at first. Their battlefield AIs lagged, unprepared for the kinetic energy math Earth had perfected generations ago. By the time their subcommanders shouted orders, 5 more units had been destroyed. Inside Mahler, Reyes hooped. "Goddamn, did you see that thing crumple?" "Focus," Elias growled. "They're not beaten yet." From his perch, Trexer watched in confusion. His visor filtered and lost metrics, casualties, thermal trajectories. The data was wrong. Everything was wrong. His machines weren't supposed to fall to simple explosives. Were the energy shields? The countermeasures? "They're using metal slugs," the analyst stammered. "But fast ones. Very fast." Trexer turned slowly. "Primitive. They're punching through our shielding as if it's..." "Primitive," he repeated, voice quieter. The next round struck a command glider, detonating its anti-grav engines and sending it cartwheeling into the side of a ridge. Debris scattered over a squad of Veruan soldiers, shredding their nanoweave armor and painting the snow red. The human tanks advanced now, one at a time, never exposing flanks. Snow kicked up behind them in roaring jets as they maneuvered with brutal efficiency. They weren't graceful. They didn't hover. They crushed, tore, and burned. Elias kept his hand on the comms switch, listening to the chaos across channels. Some Empire units tried to retreat. Others advanced blindly, confused by disrupted navigation signals and false beacons planted days earlier. Reyes lined up another shot. A plasma turret vehicle glowed in his sight. The round left the barrel, and moments later the turret was gone, the remaining shell of the vehicle spinning like a top before erupting. Human infantry moved alongside the tanks, using their bulk for cover. Elias saw them press forward, soldiers with frost on their beards, determination in their eyes. They didn't fight with technology. They fought with intent. A sudden flash cut through the trees, an Empire heavy beam, narrowly missing Mahler and leaving a molten scar in the snow. Barnes yelped. Adjusting position, Reyes snapped, swiveling the turret. Target locked. The return shell cut through the trees and found the source. A fireball bloomed, lighting the woods for a heartbeat before vanishing into steam and ash. Elias exhaled. "That's enough for today. Let them crawl back." Over comms, Singh reported, "They're scattering. Not retreating, panicking. Let them. We've shown them what cold steel really is." Trexer stood alone on the ridge now, surrounded by flickering death reports. 1,000,000 credits worth of war machinery destroyed by ancient tanks and iron slugs. He stared into the valley as Abrams tanks repositioned silently, the only sound the deep growl of their engines. "They should not have power like this," he whispered. Behind him, the wind howled. No response came. In the valley, the snow began to fall again, soft, slow, almost tender. It dusted the smoking wreckage of alien machines and kissed the dark plating of the M1 Abrams as it reversed back into cover. Still hungry, still waiting. A silence settled over the battlefield that felt unnatural. Smoke twisted between the pine trees like serpents, coiling around shattered pieces of alien war machines. Their once perfect symmetry was marred. Blackened husks of the Veruan legions, pride, now lay broken in snow, strewn across frozen terrain by weapons they had mocked. Captain Elias Grant sat motionless inside Mahler, listening to the faint ticking of the engine cooling. Every breath he took was slow, deliberate. His fingers rested on the edge of the command console, as if touching the machine itself offered clarity. He wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Across the comms, faint chatter rippled, a mix of awe, confusion, and brutal efficiency. Human forces regrouped, counted their ammo, checked for wounded. No triumph in their tone, just acknowledgement. One battle survived. Nothing more. Recon teams report scattered movement along the northwest ridge, Reyes muttered, scanning his panel. No formation, just motion. They're probing, Elias replied, trying to figure out what just happened. Reyes looked up. They should have figured out already. We killed them. That's what happened. Elias didn't answer. Something about the sudden quiet unsettled him more than the fighting had. The Veroan weren't used to being pushed back. That meant they wouldn't accept it. They'd return, angrier, smarter, and dangerous in ways they hadn't yet revealed. From behind the tank, Sergeant Anika Havel approached, her breath fogging in the cold. She was wrapped in snow-dusted gear, a hardened scout whose eyes never stopped moving. She tapped twice on the Abrams side armor, and Elias cracked the hatch to meet her. "We've got movement on the southern approach," she said without preamble. "Not combat units. Probes. Thin ones. Too fast for our scopes to track properly." Elias frowned. "They're scanning us? More than that. I think they're trying to map the terrain. Possibly our supply routes." He climbed fully out of the hatch, boots crunching softly as he landed beside her. "Then they're preparing for a counterstrike." "Exactly," Anika said, voice low. "And we're still down to 10 tanks and maybe 50 infantry. We break here, and the rest of the continent falls." He nodded, jaw set. "We need to hold the valley." Anika's brow lifted slightly. "With 10 tanks?" "No," Elias replied. "With 10 Abrams." She didn't smile, but something flickered in her eyes. Recognition, respect. She knew the weight of that statement. Back at the ridge, High Marshal Trexer's command canopy was cloaked in thick fog, its glass smeared with soot from scorched oxygen vents. He stood in the center of a holographic war table, data swirling around him in alien symbols. His advisors flanked him, silent, knowing better than to speak unless summoned. Trexer's fists were clenched behind his back. "They do not use shielding," he growled. "Their weapons fire chunks of metal. There are no quantum signatures, no pulse emissions, no gravity warp." "Primitive, sir," said his second-in-command. "Primitive," Trexer repeated, "yet effective." He turned, and his gaze locked onto the tactical interface. A bright crescent of human-controlled ground blinked steadily within their perimeter. It should have collapsed in minutes. Instead, it held strong, like a splinter buried beneath the skin of a superpower. "Deploy the first vortex element," he commanded. "We'll drown them in entropy. Bring the particle shredders. I want them gone by sundown." Back in a human camp, the tanks had repositioned into staggered cover lines. Infantry took high ground, laying down sensor nets made of copper wire and frost-flecked drone discs. Elias stood before his team, a holographic topography displayed over the hood of an old command vehicle. "This isn't a siege," he said, voice low and firm. "It's bait. They'll come fast, thinking we're out of position. So we give them that impression. We draw them in close." Barnes scratched the side of his helmet. "Close with what?" "They're bringing particle shredders. That crap turns everything into red mist." "Exactly," Elias nodded. "But they need time to set up. They're not mobile. We hit them before they're ready." Reyes narrowed his eyes. "You want us to go on the offensive?" Elias met his stare. "I want to remind them that humans don't dig in. We strike back. The plan was formed quickly. Anika's scouts would harass the Veruans' forward setup teams, forcing them to spread thin. Meanwhile, the Abrams would rotate through decoy positions, firing, repositioning, disappearing. Make it look chaotic. Make it look desperate. It began at dusk. The Empire's assault shimmered down the valley like liquid obsidian. The first vortex element arrived not with thunder, but silence. Long, insectal walkers moved in elegant unison, limbs emitting no sound as they strode over snowbanks. Between them, floating towers hovered, each containing a humming shard of unstable energy. The particle shredders. But something was wrong. Their forward teams weren't returning. Drones vanished without a trace. Readings flickered and died. Then the first shell screamed through the air. A direct hit slammed into a tower stabilizer, erupting in a crimson sphere that collapsed into itself, taking 3 walkers with it. The snow below warped as the gravity field failed, pulling machines and pieces of trees into a sudden miniature vortex before imploding. The Veruans shrieked in confusion. Their formations tangled. More shells came, faster, accurate with no warning. No plasma trails to trace. Just fire and ruin. Elias's voice rang through human comms. Shift positions. Keep the angles rotating. His tank moved like a beast through the forest, ice cracking beneath its treads. From the brush, Reyes fired another sabot shell. It ripped through the second tower's anchor and sent it crashing down the ravine. Trexer watched the battlefield unravel from his command canopy. His elite force was disintegrating. The shredders were gone, neutralized before they could fire a single pulse. They knew, he said, almost in disbelief. They knew where we'd be. One of his advisors spoke cautiously. The human captain, he is not relying on technology. He is predicting behavior. It is intuition. Impossible, Trexer hissed. No commander thinks faster than an imperial battle algorithm. And yet, the results were undeniable. As the battle intensified, Elias remained focused. His team had taken losses. 1 Abrams disabled by a freak plasma strike, 3 infantry down, but their line held. They weren't fighting with superiority. They were fighting with tenacity, timing, and a brutal understanding of terrain and cover. Anika's squad circled behind the enemy's right flank, cutting down command drones and forcing their coordination to collapse. She moved like a shadow, carving a path through frost and fire. Trexer, watching the final vortex tower fall in flames, felt something he hadn't in decades. Uncertainty. They are humans, he whispered. How are they doing this? No one answered. On the ground, Elias stood atop Mauler again, eyes fixed on the horizon where the last of the vortex walkers limped away, dragging one shattered leg. Behind him, the valley smoldered, trees bent but unbroken. Soldiers walked among wreckage, tired but undefeated. Barnes climbed up beside him, helmet off, hair damp with sweat. Think they'll be back? Oh yeah, Elias said, not looking away. But next time, they'll be afraid. The sky darkened as night settled in. Snowflakes began to fall once more, soft and steady. The storm hadn't passed. It had only begun. The wind howled over the valley, curling through jagged trees like a restless spirit. What remained of the Veruans' vortex element had vanished into the mountains, leaving only burning hulls and irradiated scars in the snow. Human patrols moved through the debris slowly, weapons raised, nerves tight. Even in retreat, the enemy left traps, silent drones buried in snowbanks, pressure mines disguised as frost-glazed stones. Every step forward required precision. Captain Elias Grant stood in the shadow of a broken Veruan tower, one hand resting on its metallic spine. The alien structure pulsed faintly, reacting to the atmosphere as if wounded. He watched the glow dim with each breath, then turned away, expression unreadable. He found Sergeant Havel crouched beside the body of a fallen scout, her knife sheathed but her sidearm drawn. The soldier had taken a plasma shard to the neck. No pain, no time to scream. His fingers were still curled around a flare. Anika gently unclasped them. "They're adapting," she muttered. "Their shots are tighter. Tracking systems aren't relying on light signatures anymore. They're learning us," Elias said. "They've already learned too much." He looked down at the scout, then toward the forest beyond. The enemy had fallen back for now, but not in defeat. The silence wasn't peace, it was preparation. The command post had been re-established further up the ridge, tucked between natural rock walls and shielded by heavy camouflage netting. Soldiers rotated in and out, faces pale with exhaustion, but eyes sharp. The Abrams tanks were parked in staggered formation, crews sleeping in shifts or rewiring damage from the last engagement. A thin plume of smoke rose from a fireless kitchen, ration steam and recycled water. Every scent lingered with sweat and frost. Inside the briefing tent, Reyes paced. Maps littered the display table, showing every path, ridge, and collapsed road from the valley floor to the plateau above. "They're not coming from the west. That slope's too narrow, and we've mined it 6 times. East is too exposed," Barnes added. "Even they won't risk that." Anika stepped forward, dragging her knife along a trail on the topographic display. "They'll take the spine of the canyon. It's suicide for infantry, but they don't use infantry like we do. Their crawlers can scale vertical inclines." Elias nodded slowly. "They'll want the high ground. If they seize the plateau, they can deploy full orbital comms and bring down fire support. We lose that ridge, we're done." "What do we do?" Barnes asked. "We take the fight up," Elias replied. "Before they get there." Reyes blinked. "You want to climb the canyon?" "I want to meet them where they think we can't go." It wasn't a decision made lightly. Climbing through the canyon's jagged path meant abandoning armored cover, splitting the units into strike teams, and facing the Veroan without the Abrams. But time wasn't on their side. Intelligence intercepts showed movement, massive, too coordinated to be a feint. The enemy wasn't retreating anymore. They were concentrating. That night, under a moonless sky, the teams moved out. 3 squads ascended into the canyon under full blackout. Boots scraped ice-covered stone. Hands gripped exposed roots and frozen cables from a pre-war power station long since gutted. No one spoke. Anika led the point squad, her body flowing from shadow to shadow like smoke. She barely made a sound, guiding soldiers through vertical climbs and narrow ledges with silent hand signals and cold, calculating precision. Elias moved with the second unit, burdened by the weight of leadership more than the gear on his back. Every man and woman behind him believed in the plan because he'd made it. That was the weight of command. Confidence didn't mean certainty. It meant commitment. They reached the upper ridge before dawn. The plateau spread before them like a broken crown, flat, scarred, and treacherous. Giant metal fragments from past wars jutted out of the snow, half buried in ice. Smoke curled from cracks in the ground, where geothermal vents bled warmth into the air. And across the field, crawling like a tide of obsidian insects, came the Veroan. Thousands. Sleek, glimmering machines slithered over stone like water. Their shapes weren't uniform. Some moved on limbs, others hovered, others oozed like living metal. But all of them shared a terrible unity of purpose. A hive without hesitation. Elias crouched behind a shattered solar pylon. He watched them deploy, silent, meticulous, terrifying. He lifted his calm. "Reyes, target the relay drones. They're still blind without them." From the other end of the ridge, Reyes's team opened fire. The silence of the plateau shattered as high-velocity rounds screamed through the morning haze. Relay drones exploded in sharp flashes, raining glass and plasma fragments. Chaos rippled through the Veruan front line. But the enemy adapted fast. Their crawlers surged forward, spider-like limbs clinging to the cliff walls, trying to flank. Anika and her team intercepted them mid-motion, laying down suppressive fire and planting directional charges. Explosions lit the ridge edge in a stuttering sequence. Screams echoed, inhuman, modulated, synthetic. Elias's team moved forward, deeper into the plateau, toward a central tower rising like a dagger from the stone. If they could destroy it, they could collapse the Veruan's battlefield command. They reached the base of the tower just as enemy skirmishers descended from above. Sleek humanoid forms, coated in reflective armor, dropped into their midst like falling stars. The clash was brutal. Hand-to-hand, close-range gunfire, knives, fists, desperation. Elias fought like a man possessed. One of the skirmishers lunged at him with a spear of sharpened light. He ducked under it, drove a knife into the creature's thigh joint, then pivoted and fired into its chest point blank. The armor cracked like porcelain. Another came from behind. Barnes intercepted it, firing a shotgun burst that threw the enemy back over the ridge. Elias didn't pause. Plant the charges. Reyes scrambled to the tower base and set the demolition timers. Sparks danced as the magnets locked into place. The Veruan were closing fast, too fast. Anika's voice came through the comm. We can't hold the ridge. Too many crawlers. Fall back to blast radius, Elias ordered. Now! They pulled back together, covering each other, dragging the wounded. The timer ticked down in Elias's mind as clearly as if it were painted across the sky. 15 seconds. He turned back one last time. The tower stood proud, untouched by weather, untouched by time. He hated how clean it looked, how alien. He hated what it meant. 5 seconds. They dove behind a frozen ridge as the charges detonated. The explosion wasn't a roar. It was a scream. The tower didn't simply collapse. It unraveled. Layers of synthetic fiber and liquid crystal came apart in a soundless pulse that shattered nearby machines. A dome of pressure flattened everything within 100 meters. Elias covered his ears, but the sound still penetrated, deep, wrong, like being stared at by something with no eyes. When it was over, the tower was gone. The plateau was silent again. Anika crawled to Elias's side, face streaked with soot. We did it. For now, he said. She looked back toward the smoldering remains. They'll know we're not animals anymore. They'll know we're hunters, Elias replied. Above them, the sky turned red as the first rays of sunlight cut through the smoke. Far off in orbit, aboard a vast Veruan dreadnought, High Marshal Trexer stood before a display showing the battle's aftermath. Data flickered, enemy movements, casualty spikes, tower collapse. He leaned forward, claws tapping the glass. Dispatch the Warlord cast, he said. No more games. And far below, Elias felt a cold weight settle in his chest. Something darker was coming. The clouds boiled overhead, heavy with snow and ash, casting a bruised light over the battlefield below. Smoke drifted in thick curtains from burning wreckage, and the air carried the scent of scorched ozone, melted alloy, and blood. The plateau, once a high ground advantage, had become a graveyard of both alien machinery and human effort. The Veruan had responded to the tower's destruction not with retreat, but fury. Elias crouched in a trench carved hastily into the frozen ground, blood seeping through the fabric of his right sleeve. Around him, soldiers huddled against the cold in fear, steam rising from their breath in shallow bursts. They were outgunned, outnumbered, but not out of fight. The warlord caste had arrived. They were different, larger, more brutal in design, less machine, more beast. No sleek elegance like the drones or skirmishers. These walked with thunderous weight, their armor blackened and jagged, their weapons fused into their limbs. Where earlier Veruan units had moved with cold precision, these stalked forward with hatred in every motion. This wasn't war to them. It was vengeance. Their breaking formation, Anika reported, crawling beside Elias with a long barrel of her rifle slung over her back. Her face was smeared with grime, but her eyes remained sharp. "They're confident," Elias said. "They want us to see them coming. We've got less than a dozen rockets, half power on the railguns, and the Abrams are stuck at the base of the slope. That's not enough. It'll have to be." A flare arced overhead, blue. The signal meant fallback, not retreat. Reposition. Reyes's voice crackled over comms, barely cutting through the interference. "They're pressing hard through Sector 4. Can't hold much longer." "What's the call?" Elias wiped his mouth with the back of his glove, smearing more blood across his chin. He looked east, down the ridge, where thick smoke clung to the trees. If they could draw the warlords in far enough, force them into range. "We open the line," he said. "Let them chase us." Anika blinked. Into the kill box? Into the fire? Reyes didn't argue. No one did. Orders carried weight because trust had already been earned in blood. The squads moved quickly. They left false trails, remote-triggered mines, and snare charges in their wake. Human ingenuity, simple, brutal, effective. It wouldn't stop the warlords, but it would make them bleed. Elias led the fallback through the tree line, ducking behind snow-choked logs, signaling with clenched fists and short bursts of static. Behind him, the sound of Veruan pursuit grew louder. Clanking limbs, roaring plasma engines, the guttural hum of power building. One of the beasts let out a howl, synthetic and monstrous, followed by the crack of detonations as the mines slowed their pace. From the base of the slope, Reyes had rallied the remaining Abrams crews. The tanks, scarred but operational, sat in an arc, their barrels elevated and ready. Engineers worked furiously to patch in external targeting feeds. Snow hissed beneath their treads. Inside the lead Abrams, Corporal Dana Holloway sat at the gunner's console, fingers flexing. She stared into the thermal imaging feed, watching the distant heat blooms grow. Her voice was steady. Targets acquiring, confirming mass, direction, speed. "They're coming straight at us." Elias's voice came through comms. "Hold fire until you see their command units. We take the head off the snake." "Copy that." The Veruan emerged from the smoke like titans. Elias saw them from the tree line. 12-foot monstrosities, hunched and plated in segmented armor, their faces hidden behind black lenses. Their weapons glowed with lethal energy, built into their arms like industrial murder tools. They moved in formation, flanked by scout units, and shielded by kinetic barriers that shimmered faintly. One of them raised an arm, fired. A tree behind Elias exploded into splinters. Shards of bark sliced through his jacket. He didn't flinch. Instead, he broke cover and ran across the open snow, waving his arm. The others followed. They had to draw them in. The Veruan advanced. Without hesitation, the humans fell back into the designated kill zone, an open basin rimmed by ice-covered boulders and sloped terrain. There was no natural protection, only bait. Elias dropped to a knee at the basin's edge, raised his hand, and screamed into the comm. "Now!" The Abrams opened fire. A wall of sound erupted, deafening, physical, apocalyptic. The main cannons belched shells that screamed through the air and slammed into the Veruan line. One warlord vanished in a cloud of metal and vapor. Another staggered, its armor torn open, black fluid spraying from its chest. The tanks kept firing. Holloway's gun tracked targets like a conductor directing a symphony of death. Every round was deliberate. Every hit, punishment. The warlords tried to raise shields, but kinetic impact overwhelmed them. They fell back, but it was too late. Reyes detonated the charges lining the ridge. The slope collapsed in a thunderous roar, burying 2 warlords in stone and ice. Those that remained turned to regroup, but found themselves surrounded. Elias and his teams re-emerged from the treeline, weapons hot. They didn't hesitate. Gunfire lit the basin like a lightning storm. Grenades fell in arcs. One of the warlords turned to face Elias, its chest burning, arm raised to fire. Elias dove sideways, rolled through the snow, and fired a burst into the joint at the creature's neck. Its head snapped back. It didn't fall. It charged. Anika tackled Elias out of the way a split second before the Veruin crashed down where he'd stood. She rose, pulled her knife, and drove it into the alien's eye socket. Sparks burst. The creature spasmed and went still. More kept coming. Holloway screamed through the calm. Shells almost gone. Make the last ones count, Elias barked. The remaining tanks fired point blank. The warlords tried to close the distance, but speed wasn't enough. One by one, they were torn apart. And then silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was ragged, breathless. The kind of silence that came after total violence, where the only sound was snow melting on hot metal. Elias sat in the blood-stained snow, chest heaving. His weapon was empty. His hand shook. Anika stood nearby, leaning on her rifle like a crutch. Smoke rose from craters where alien bodies twitched. Reyes limped over, blood down one leg. That all of them? Elias didn't answer right away. He stared at the blackened remains of the warlords, at the wreckage of human resolve and alien arrogance. Then he looked toward the sky. No, he said, but they'll remember this. Far above, aboard the Veruin dreadnought, High Marshal Trexer watched in silence. His command deck flickered with data feeds. Losses, telemetry, ruined units. Around him, advisors shifted uncomfortably. One approached. They used primitive weapons. Trexer's gaze didn't leave the screen. Their weapons are not primitive. They are obsolete by galactic standards. Crude. Inefficient. Trexer turned, his voice low. And yet we bleed. He walked to the viewport, where Earth hung below, scarred, defiant, unconquered. In the invasion, he said, this war will not be won by force. And the humans? Trexer's voice darkened. They are not animals. They are monsters. And monsters do not fear death. They teach it. Back on the plateau, Elias looked out over the field of victory. Get the wounded inside, he said. Bury our dead. Anika nodded. And the enemy? He holstered his pistol. Let their dead rot in the snow. The galaxy needs the reminder.